Great. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm proud to bring to the Comic X show where Machi X and NextChapter present the amazing show featuring Chen and the Wingman. So I'm Penguin. You might have seen me around some of the Discord channels. Big up to the whale community, especially Show, Whale Shark, and everyone else making this happen. You guys are all amazing, and thank you so much for everything that you do and giving back to the community. So I wanted to take a chance to introduce Sean, who is a legend in the comic industry and is responsible for a lot of the characters that we kind of grew up with and are very iconic to the Marvel and DC franchise. So, Sean, are you there with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, fantastic! Great. Well, it's great to be here. So, yeah. Just if you have questions, or do you want me to
Yeah,
whatever you want
so
me to do?
so I- I'll ask you some questions and just feel free to answer them. Is everyone able to see my screen share? Okay. Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, so yeah, the Machi X build here at Comic X was created for this show where we're going to showcase a lot of Sean's Marvel and DC profiles as we do limited edition drops of some of the physical prints that he has. So we're doing them in 4 different sets of releases, starting with drop 1. So the first release, um, it's going to have a Spider-Man isolate where it's just Spider-Man. The Avengers, we're going to have Voltron cover 5. And we have Batman Beyond number 46 and Iron Man on top of the truck. Is there anything that you want to tell us about some of these pieces, Sean, that we might not know from looking at them? Like, especially, can we dig into like the Spider-Man one? When did you do Spider-Man, and when is this piece from? Are you able to hear me, Sean?
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. So all those pieces were done for various reasons. Some of them are from advertisement jobs, and like the Iron Man on top of the truck was for a Microsoft, like a launch initiative or something like that, where they made a print for kind of in conjunction with the New York Comic Con. So this was put out at the Microsoft store in New York, and some other ones, like the ones that have Batman Beyond, are primarily original art from the Batman Beyond comic book, which is the book I'm currently drawing for DC Comics. And so those, the way I do the artwork is I kind of draw each panel separately and then composite it all together in Photoshop to give the inker or the editor one big page, but it's all drawn separately, and that's just for my convenience. And because it's drawn separately, it's hard to sell as a piece of original art because the page is all separated. So I took some of the better ones and kind of isolated them, and then that's what you have there. So there's the book number and the book name, book number, and then the panel number. So if you see that, you can go to the store, and I think those issues are currently out on the stand now, and you can actually match it up to a panel that's in the comic book. So those are all work in progress shots that are eventually appear in the comic itself.
That's amazing, and I love that about the NextChapter project and what you're doing. It really feels like we're getting the Comic-Con experience in the digital space. Is COVID kind of one of the things that brought you into and NextChapter into this space?
Absolutely, I think. Well, I think a comic book convention, especially the New York Comic Con, is probably the worst type of place to be during a pandemic like this. It seems like it was just designed just to spread the disease. In fact, there's this thing called Con Crud, which when you go to a convention like New York, everyone comes back with some sort of illness, but you get like the cold or whatever, and that's self-limiting. But this is something that can spread even easier, and it could really put you out for a while. So all of us comic book creators are really missing the convention experience, because it's an important, very important part of what we do in terms of connecting with the fans, meeting editors, seeing our colleagues, and also a chance to to sell our wares and just in general, just have a social aspect to what we do, because a lot of times we're just at home drawing all day, like in our basement or in our studio, and we have no human contact outside of like the conventions quite often. So this is I think I kind of consider it to be the way of the future. I'm not usually a first adopter of any type of thing, but this is, I think, something that's you're gonna see a lot more of. And that's when Carl brought it up to me, like, do you want to do this? I'm like, oh, I'm usually not the first out of the gate for these things, but it just seems to be where everything's going, and it seems to be ideal to kind of pick up with the slack from the missing comic book conventions.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Yeah, I agree, and I think that the human interaction for everything just really gives us all validation for what we're doing. And I grew up with Marvel cards and like the Masterpiece and the Impel cards, where the actual art and the panels really helped define who the characters were before a lot of the character stories were fleshed out. And you actually got to help build the modern vision that a lot of us have for these characters like Iron Man and Spiderman, and you stepped into it in a time where comics were kind of iffy. Is that right?
Yeah, I think. Well, when I came in, it was kind of at the height of a boom. I think there was a storyline where Superman died, and that one was sold so many copies that it created a huge bubble. And I kind of really profited off of that, because my first book came out on the heels of that. So my first comic book sold like 800,000 copies, and then very quickly the bubble burst, and then Marvel was kind of in bankruptcy. I mean, it's getting all the way down there. So, and that's kind of where I came in to Marvel, and it was kind of like building things from the ground up. And my first book there was Iron Man, and with a writer named Kurt Busiek. So Kurt Busiek is a great writer, and he kind of wrote a very seminal modern Iron Man stories that translated kind of directly into what you see in the movies for Iron Man.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, you really get a feel for that when we went out of kind of the golden age and into the 90s. It really still feels like those character designs have stuck, except for Batman. Batman is one of those kind of ever evolving things, and you're really pushing that still with Batman Beyond. How do you kind of innovate with some, like one of the original superhero, non-superhero characters like Batman?
I was actually kind of surprised when they asked me if I wanted to do Batman Beyond. It's based off the cartoon Batman Beyond, and that was like it's a very stylized world. So it's almost like a film noir and Art Deco or something. And everyone kind of existed as kind of like graphic designs that are moving around. It had a very realistic style, so I kind of had to really figure out things like the details of how costume works or how his vehicles would look in detail, because most of the time they're just kind of silhouettes or just shapes. So that was kind of my personal spin on it. When you see Neo Gotham, it's different than it is in the animation, even though it has a similar feel. I kind of have to bring a level of realism to it, because that's kind of my style. So the writer for that book was actually the guy who's responsible for killing Superman that started this whole bubble in the first place. So that's Dan Jurgens. And so yeah, I'll be coming up to the anniversary issue number 50 pretty soon. I'll start that next week. And yeah, it's been a great run. I mean, it's a book that I think really plays up to all my strengths. I kind of draw very high-tech stuff. I have to draw realistically. And so I think it was the best fitting book for me since I came back from advertising, and I'm just really glad to be on it.
Excellent. Yeah, I love it. As you say, it's very like muscular and toned and like almost like the fashion industry. And then you contrast it with something like Voltron, where Voltron does really have that industrial design kind of look and edges. how do you compare something like your work with Voltron?
Well, Voltron, well, my background is in industrial design, so I kind of always wanted to draw comics, but it was kind of, you don't really go to school for that. So I studied industrial design because I have a love for just man-made objects and drawing on a more technical level. For me, I'm very artistic and creative, but I always needed some boundaries for it. I needed to have some sort of like structure to it. So I'm drawn to the very technical side of drawing. So that was a good fit for me too. Although I gotta say that if I draw very precisely and I draw, sometimes I can turn myself so much into a machine to draw these perfectly straight lines and perfectly realized perspectives. A lot of times people will look at it and just assume that it's computer generated, so you almost get no credit for it. But all of those things are done with rulers, ink pens, and ellipse templates and French curves. So each cover would take a lot of time just to figure out all the perspective. So that's another aspect of drawing. I mean, you get to draw organic things. Like if I drew like Spiderman and Elektra for a while, and those are very organic, very fluid. And then I get to draw things like Voltron. It's all machine work. It's my first real breakout thing at Marvel was Iron Man, and one of the reasons was I think they saw that I can draw the mechanics very well, and maybe weren't so thrilled about how I drew anatomy at that time because I was just kind of starting out. But I found that as I got more and more experience, the characters I drew became more and more kind of naked over after a while.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I love the crisp lines and also like the amount of detail that goes into each piece. How long does it take to make one of these panels by hand?
Well, there's a couple of things you're probably seeing there. One is covers and pinups, which are usually single images that are usually on an 11 by 17 piece of paper. And then there are individual panels that are much smaller, like say like maybe 5 panels make up one page. And those are more storytelling pages. So they kind of work in concert with maybe 4 other panels on the page. A cover usually takes me about 3 days to come up with the idea and then to pencil it and then ink it all the way to until it's fully realized. And I draw with it. I have a very meticulous style, so I take a little bit longer than most people. I always think that well, people kind of read comics very quickly, and you can kind of glance at the image and then get the gist of it, and mostly have the story carried by the writing. But if there's someone who wanted to really take a deeper dive into the artwork, I want to make sure that there's stuff there for them to really look at. And that's one of the things with Wingman too. I mean, we released that on Instagram, and people are kind of looking at it on mobile, and you can get 100% of the story that way. But I also wanted to make it so that it would be supportive of a print release, so that you can actually look at it and take a really deep dive into the nuance of the writing and as well as the art. And since it's just printed once, and you can kind of tear through it in 15 minutes if you wanted to. But if someone wanted to sit down and really appreciate it, I wanted to make sure there's enough there that it can, just dwell on it for a while. And there's a lot of Easter eggs in there and a lot of levels of meaning. So it can support, you get a big bang for your buck because you can actually kind of relive it over and over again and find and discover more.
Excellent. And what about the storytelling for Wingman? Where did that story come from?
Well, I've been drawing comics for maybe like a quarter century, and then all of it was for it's client-based work for Marvel or DC or Valiant Comics. So they usually have a writer attached to these and an editor, so they kind of tell you what to draw. And I was perfectly fine with that for a long time. But then someone told me, like, if you never really write something on your own, you'll never really know your own voice. Like, what type of stories do you want to do? And I wouldn't say that Wingman is exactly that. I mean, Wingman is also a reaction to drawing superhero slugfest for 25 years. So you kind of swing the pendulum the other side even further. But I would just I saw these images of from the movie The Seventh Seal, which I saw and really got into it. But particularly the opening image where Death and the Knight are playing chess on a craggy beach. I mean, that's very visual, and I felt like that's for its time, that's like a real iconic, like a comic book moment. Like this guy is really thinking visually. He's not like writing any type like a stage play where it's just people talking. He's really thinking about the visual impact of the scene he's creating. So I thought it would make, because of the cinematography, also it would make a great image and be fun to draw. So I drew it, and then I realized that what also was very kind of iconic and very cool about it was the dialogue, because they had like a little bit of a, I am death and stuff like that. So that was kind of cool. So I put a word balloon in there, and people kind of thought it was a comic, and they said, well, where's the next part? So I just kept kind of going from there. In terms of a methodology for writing a comic, I wouldn't say that's a good way to do it. But if you were able to go progress as slowly as I have, because there was no due date, this kind of unfolded 50 more pages over a period of an entire year. You can really plan where you're going and explore every single avenue. So that's basically how that came about.
I love the humor and just the way that the jokes kind of flow throughout the piece. There's a lot of tiebacks for things that happen early in it that are referenced 20 pages later, and I think that those tie-ins just they really go together and show that there's a lot of time and humor spent into the book. One of the things that first also jumped out at me is like the Bill and Ted thing. You got Death there. Hey bro, let's play Twister to get out of here,
Right.
not just the chess. And he straight out whips out an XL. And I think we should start heading upstairs as we talk about this, and we can get a little bit more feel for the experience of Wingman. So upstairs in this build, we can actually walk through, I'd say about half of the book. I tried to be as preservative as I could of the entire story, where each panel and each page is going to take up the field of your vision. So everyone is kind of free to walk through the gallery and experience the comic book in a way that you really can't do with a physical book. Also, this is a 24-hour window that we are able to purchase a physical copy of the book, and Sean has that available on his website. And if you purchase the book, there is a chance that you will also get a physical panel. Is that how that's working, Sean?
I'm not quite sure about that yet, but
Okay.
the details of it. But
Yeah,
I
so
think
we're also kind of exploring that with the other pieces that we'll have for the drops, where potentially the winner will be able to receive a physical copy of the panel as well, right?
right, yes.
Okay, and so what that kind of means is that if you buy one of the limited pieces, which will be one of 20s, that you will have like a 1 in 20 shot of winning the physical piece that goes along with it. 1 in 10 will have a 1 in 10 chance of getting it, and we'll also have unique pieces which will be at auction and will be guaranteed to get the piece. So the story here goes and it follows Antonius and Death. Was there anything that you said you focused Death on the seal? Is there anything that you focused like Antonius' story on? What's his deal?
Well, when I first started out doing it, it was supposed to be just a lighthearted comedy type thing. I didn't actually know too much about the movie because I saw it like kind of after I started drawing this, and I actually didn't even see Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. So I thought it would be funny to take this very serious thing and instead of playing chess, to play other types of pop culture referential games. But as soon as I put it up on Instagram, everyone said like, "Well, this is a lot like Bill and Ted," which I never saw before. So I quickly watched that, and I was like, "Oh boy, this project is over." So then before I threw in the towel, I went to go see, completely see the Seventh Seal, and I was really taken by the drama aspect of that. So I think I thought I can get actually a better story going with the serious drama aspect, and then dropped all the silly gags. But of course, you can't drop the silly gags altogether, otherwise there'll be a tonal shift. So anyone who reads this will see that there's some very serious drama moments with the stakes when the stakes are very, very high, and then it's immediately followed by just some ridiculous gag. So it's this story is kind of very schizophrenic in that way. Just to keep consistent with the tones that set out from the beginning. And I think that's one of the things that are special about it is that the fact that it grew organically that way. You end up getting a story that's not like anything else out there, and which is good because I think with all the media that we see and stories from all different streaming media, and we've seen it all basically. And to really grab someone, you got to show something that's a little bit eccentric, a little bit out there. Otherwise, it's really not worth writing home to mom about. Um, so yeah, I took Antonius' story arc, pretty much from the way he is in the movie. I mean, he spent 10 years in fighting the Crusades in the name of God. And he was kind of sold on that idea as a boy. But then during the war, you find out that he's beginning to doubt his faith is kind of in question because what he's seen and what he's done. He's pretty sure that God has no part in this. And then he is in a serious existential crisis, which is at the point where we meet him. And that's when he meets Death too. And Death he's got some serious questions about life that he needs answers to. But then Death comes and say, your time is up. So he's basically screwed. So it's a big race to see if he can find that closure and desperately try to delay how much time he has to live using any method he can. And then by the end of the story, try to wrap things up so that he can kind of go off and in peace if that's where he has to go. So.
Yeah, I love the piece right now. Right now we're at the Death holding the Beth cup, and I love how Death is like unabashedly like, whatever, I drink a caramel frappuccino. If you want to deal with it, like, you're gonna have to deal with it.
Right? Yeah, that's one of those things where there is a serious drama part of it, but then a lot of it's just kind of ridiculous. And my big concern was that people won't accept both of those extremes in one story. But it just seems that people really seem to like that, so I'm kind of relieved.
Yeah, I think especially with the name mismatch on the Starbucks cup, I made a wearable of that, and actually I'm making a vinyl cup of it right now for the Starbucks because I love it so much.
Oh, very cool.
How did you come up with the Starbucks idea? How did that kind of make its way into the story?
Well, everything is basically like there's these things, I guess, exposition dumps or info dumps that you need to have in these stories. So I need to know, need the readers to know what Death's mission is and what he's there to do, and that he takes his job very seriously. But then if you just dump this information, you can really dump people right out of your story because no one really likes to sit through all that stuff. So I got to find some way to lead into it with a joke and use the subject matter. So I thought that would be a good joke to lead into this discussion about Death and what he does, and then use kind of names as a way to get into it. So he's talking about how his name is, Rock Bottom or whatever. Like it's just a way using names just to lead into an info dump. And then if you can do that properly, you can actually make an info dump one of the better parts of your story. So that little joke came out of just trying to solve a problem of how to tell the story about who Death is and what his mission is, but not to make it so obvious and dry that people just kind of like yawn. So kind of made a joke to lead into it and kept the subject about names as a lead into a discussion about his job. So, these are all functional things, but trying to find some way to solve these problems. And if you solve them well, they don't just solve a problem, but they actually become some of the better parts of your story.
So how did Antonio know about Destiny? How did he know where they should go and what an ATM is?
Yeah, that's another thing. This is supposed to be a slapstick comedy from the beginning. So if you have this Knight of the Crusades alive in modern times, it's not such a big deal because you can see that kind of thing in Monty Python. But then it took a turn into a serious drama. So that kind of leaves like a big question unanswered as to what exactly is he doing alive now? So, and I'll have to say that's something that I never really addressed. I'm sure that some writers out there who are, higher up on the pay grade than I am can figure something out and make it actually a great story out of it. But one of the things is that maybe that Antonius is a kind of like an angel who needs to earn his wings, so he actually has to kind of keep coming back at different times. Um, and then
Yeah,
yeah,
I
so give me.
also, when I read it, I got the feeling that, death is kind of on that infinite corridor. So while Antonius is kind of shadowing him and being his wingman, he's kind of on that infinite time corridor too. So he's kind of had the pleasures of the future as well as the history of the past.
Right. And one of the things that I liked was, I think if you see Antonius doing some childish and kind of just indulging in all sorts of stuff that's in that area of California, I think the reasoning behind that is because he's in a funk, so he's kind of distracting himself by doing things that people do to distract themselves. They'll play video games all day and they'll drink or whatever, give in to their vices, and he feels that that there is probably is no God, and he's been abandoned, so he's kind of just depressed and just kind of distracting himself, wasting time. Um, but kind of ironically, when he does have to kind of do battle with death, he's been given certain tools. And one of the main ones that all that time he spent goofing off is what he uses to distract death, because now you can show death, like, you need to go here, you should go here, I've been to a strip club, this is a good one. All that stuff that you think was just time wasting was actually like a bigger plan to just arm him with what he needs to prolong more time and to get his mission going, which is to save some people in the hospital. So it's
Can I
it's
ask
kind of
about
deep.
that?
Yeah,
So,
sure.
what kind of motivates Antonius to do this life switch around? It seems like when he talks to the priest, he's like, "I died for Christianity. You don't even know what reality is." But then for him to kind of sacrifice eternity and having fun with death and his buddy for someone that he doesn't know, like, what kind of makes him do that sacrifice and that switch?
Well, I think from what I've seen of the movie, he's a knight of the Crusades, and those people are very brave, and they have no problems with death. So when Antonius is, you wonder, like, why is he running so desperately from the Grim Reaper? Then, if he's really supposed to be brave, for him, because he has some serious unanswered questions, uh, he needs that before he goes. He needs these answers. Otherwise, his death becomes, it's worse than death. It's damnation, right? So he's trying to actually not avoid dying, but trying to answer some serious questions. And he realized that he wasted practically his entire life being sold on this idea of going off to war in the name of God and actually killing a lot of people, and finding out that that probably had nothing to do with the bigger goal he was looking for. So this is sort of a way where he didn't have much time left. So the priest says, "Well, you can do one decent thing, for the first time ever. That's your decision to help out in some way, and then that should be enough to settle your mind." So I think that kind of resonated with him. He didn't have to try to spend an entire second life undoing everything and doing the right thing. He doesn't have much time left, and I think he'd be forgiven if he just does one simple act that's a sacrifice. So he desperately needed to do that one thing.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you so much for that and that story insight. As you're reading these, it's really helpful to have kind of that story outside the story, and I think that's one of the things you do in the physical book. Is that right? You've got like side notes for everything.
Right. So if anyone is, I think what Carl, the publisher, intended was just sort of like a director's commentary, which adds another level of interest to the story, just to see how the creator and the writer and the artist is thinking and why they make these decisions. For me, I was more interested in actually teaching people how to do this, because there's a lot of people, especially the ones that I'm familiar with from the convention route, that everyone wants to put out their own comic book. And even if it's not a comic book, everyone wants to have their Netflix pitch accepted. And, comics are a good kind of stepping stone toward that. So there's a lot of people who want to create comics, but not many people know how to do it. It can be very complex. So I try to, in the space that I have left over, because this was a square comic, and then there's the book itself is a horizontal format, so that leaves room for a lot of stuff. And there's little tips and tricks, little things about how to do word balloons and how to mitigate the exposition dump and how to deal with all the things about the art and the writing that I thought were really important to get across to people. So by using this, you can actually get a good primer on how to get a comic book going. And I think that was what I wanted to do. And also, Carl wanted me to tell the story behind the story, which he thought was interesting. So beyond what you would see in the free version on Instagram, you can get the entire story printed in print this time that you can actually look closely at. But also all the extra stuff in there, which is both interesting and informative. So I think it makes a nice package. It's 64 pages in all. And I think it really does a good job of entertaining and on many levels. So I hope people will really get into it.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it too. How long on an average day do you sit down and draw?
Well, it's pretty much all day long. When you do a comic book, it's 20 pages, and each page has maybe 5 panels on it. It takes maybe a day and a half or a day and a quarter to finish a page. And then basically the book comes out every month. So, you cannot draw too much. And that's the one thing about comics. It can really burn you out because it's such a grind. So I actually did this comic when I moved out of comics into advertising. And with that, you draw a lot less, for a lot more money. So there was a lot more time off, and I was able to do this on the side because I really missed it. And then doing the Wingman project, I really thought that I can draw faster and better than I did before. So now I'm back into comics full time again. But yeah, it's pretty much drawing all the time. So it's part of the
I'm so thankful to have you back in the space and drawing the art and sharing it, and being here and present and sharing it with all the people that are in a completely different industry. And I think one of the best things that virtual worlds give us is they give us a way to experience things in a new way, and really provide new ownership and placement for things that have been near and dear to a lot of our hearts. So thank you very much for everything that you're doing in that space and ours.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, when Carl told me that part of his mission statement for NextChapter was to connect the creators with a new community of readers, and he wasn't kidding. This is something that I never really thought I'd be part of because I didn't even really know it exists. But it's a great way to get what we do. Just an exchange of ideas. Like I'm seeing this for the first time, and it fascinates me as a medium and interface for what we do, and I hope people can look at what I do, and it just bringing communities together, and I think that's what NextChapter is all about.
Great, thank you. I think that's most of our walk through the gallery. So how about the end of the book? We don't show it here in the gallery because I wanted to kind of leave it to the viewer to go check out the Instagram or buy the book. But was the inspiration from that also from the final seal, or is there any other influence for the ending of the book?
Well, there's a couple of iconic moments in the movie. And the opening one was one, and then also they returned to that same location for the closing scene. And I guess due to the cinematography and the imagination of Ingmar Bergman, um, those are kind of obligatory scenes. So yeah, I think he kind of was the one that came up with the concept of the dance macabre, where all the people who have recently died kind of link hands together and they go off. um, and it's been parried so many times. So thankfully, it's such a visual moment that translates well into what I do. Even this comic is in black and white, and still you can do so much with it. I think it doesn't really benefit from color at all. So definitely the ending of this story, I think it's actually the best part because it really accelerates toward a crescendo, and then I guess they call it denouement. Everything is very visual and very impactful emotionally. I thought it was like a very emotionally satisfying story from the way it wrapped up. So yeah, definitely the movie was the inspiration for the big parts of the story.
Yeah, I agree. The ending is it's very iconic, and the dance macabre is just so recognizable, even if someone's not familiar with it, they'll recognize it. I think that's all the questions that I have for you today. If anyone else has any questions, they could ask them in chat maybe, and I could ask them to you.
That sounds good.
Well, thank you very much for joining me then, Sean. I know it's late there, and I really want to reiterate how awesome a project it is with what you're doing with Wingman, and thankful that you teamed up with Machi X. It's been a pleasure to bring the pieces to everyone, and I'm very thankful to be able to provide Marvel and DC works and some of your original pieces to everyone. I think it's amazing that you can share it with us, and the digi-physical aspect of it is something that we haven't really seen in the space. So I'm sure anyone that's lucky enough to participate and win one of these is going to have a really high appreciation for everything that we've done today. So thank you.
Oh, sure, and thank you so much for the opportunity to do that. The what you showed me yesterday when on the walkthrough is really blew my mind. I didn't know what to expect, but it's something that's very unique and very special. So I think you did a fantastic job. I'm really proud of this exhibit.
Thank you. And I also want to say that we're going to be doing 4 different drops. Right now, gas prices are a little crazy. They're at almost 500. So we weren't able to actually mint the pieces in time for this. But we will have 4 different drops, and we'll try and focus them like a Comic Book Wednesday. So that on Wednesdays, we'll have new comic art that is released at the Comic X Gallery. So make sure you stop by the gallery and check out everything, including the book. So thank you everyone for joining us, and good night.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good night.
Yeah, thank you guys. On behalf of the whale community, we appreciate this walkthrough. It was awesome. We love comic books and graphic novels here, so thank you very much for your time.